Chris, I'm sorry, are you ready?
Okay, you can.
Okay. We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. Was it late last night? I sent you all, sorry about the last minute email, but late last night, I sent out an email about process and provided you the attachment of the process schedule and then the tool, the interview scoring tool that you both have. The interview scoring tool can be completed as we are moving through the interview process. Anybody have any questions about the interview scoring tool right now? Okay. Set that aside. So we have 2 interviews today, and then we'll have an interview tomorrow. So just to give you an overview again of how the interviews will go, we will have a 15-minute oral presentation, the max 15-minute oral presentation with 35 minutes of Q&A. And some of the specifics that we talked about as a board at the last meeting when we identified the top 2-3 firms that we wanted to interview. We talked about specifics that we wanted the firms to cover during their presentation. And one of them was race and equity. The question that was sent to the firms was, please share your beliefs about equity more expansively, individuals with disabilities, gender, sex, immigration status, etc., and how you leverage equity and what types of work and strategies you are currently implementing in your own organization. Next one, demographics. How connected is your firm to Wisconsin and other markets? Do you have access to diverse markets? Please include details on the demographics of placed candidates. Communication and community engagement process. The question was, provide some more details on your communication plan and community engagement process. How will transparency be maintained throughout the process, and what does that look like? How will your firm access diverse views, and how will you use this information to make decisions? What tools will be used to support the engagement process? Another question that came up from all of you was the board and firm relationship. What does your working relationship with the boards look like? Please provide examples of how when you've had to challenge your board members on an issue. So each interview will be a maximum of like 15 minutes or so. We have Barb here, who will be our designated timekeeper.
Okay.
And so we'll give the firms an opportunity to do quick introductions and reiterate the expectations for the interview time. And we did send out some specific questions for each board member that, we talked about at our last board meeting. I think that, we wanted to ensure that we continue to be transparent and fair during this process, so we ask the same questions to the firms, but that does not mean that we can't ask follow-up questions and individual questions as we see fit during the interview process. Anybody have any questions, concerns about that? No? All right. Okay. Well, let's go ahead and get started.
Word, we don't have the representatives here from Hazard Young. I'm not sure if they got confused about the time and or
Are they tomorrow?
No, McPherson is supposed to be happening tomorrow.
I
have somebody else coming in here at 6 p.m.
Oh, that must have changed?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, in any case, Dr. Kevin Kastner is here from BWP.
Okay.
And he is probably ready to rock.
All right.
So,
Well, let's go ahead and take him. And then, Barb, who do we have next? Then it would be Hazard Young?
it'll be Hazard Young, yeah.
And then tomorrow we have McPherson.
That's correct.
Okay, great.
That is my understanding.
Yeah. Yay. All right. Well, welcome. You can sit at the end of the table there. And if you could sit, we are videotaping this. So if you could sit right in the middle there, and then there's a mic. If you could just push down on the mic. Perfect. Great.
So the mics actually do project, these wireless mics, but they're the same process. Just turn them on for green when you want them on.
Okay. So whenever you're ready to keep the time.
Exactly. All right.
All right.
If everyone is ready, Dr. Kastner, are you ready?
Yes,
about that.
I'm ready.
Would you like some water or anything?
I'm just fine, thank you.
Okay.
Good evening. My name is Kevin Kastner. I'm a director for BWP, and I'm really looking forward to this interview. I think you've been very thoughtful in the things you asked when we prepared our proposal. I know you've had a chance to read our proposal. Normally, we would do a PowerPoint, but it's just inappropriate with the time and the way you've organized it. So we do have a PowerPoint that's in your folder, and I'd like to tell you what's in the folder because I think some of the information in the folder might blend in with some of your questions. On the left-hand side of your folder, you're going to see the folder for BWP. Now, normally, if people ask who is BWP, I would just go black, white, purple, but it's a little different this time. And the reason is BWP was formed by 3 firms in the Midwest over 25 years ago. But one of the firms was owned by Harold Webb, and the person that owned it was Ken Underwood, who is the father of Julie Underwood. And so there's a connection more here in Madison, and I asked Julie with her permission if I could share that, because she actually did do a few searches with BWP, and she's a very talented professional, as you all know. When you look at this brochure, we're going to keep coming back, as each firm will. There's 4 parts of the process. And in 4 parts of the process, when you look at our PowerPoint, you'll see how that's outlined and how the PowerPoint is going to be very related to what you see in the proposal. The one thing that probably I want to call your attention to, and that is on the left-hand side, tasks to be performed by the search firm. This is where you know where we're on the ground with site visits and also the amount of time we're spending off-site. This document gives you a better feel, and as I would assume, some of you have not been through a superintendent search. Some of you don't realize that this ends up to be 50, 60 days of work, and it's a type of work that really takes some insight, and I think that brings us to our team. Our team is former superintendents, over 35 years of superintendent experience. That is critical. Not only that, we all know university towns. I'm from Charlottesville, University of Virginia, where I've been through that and anything else that's been going on in Charlottesville lately. You have Paul McKendrick, who's a superintendent in Tuscaloosa, University of Alabama. You got Deb Hill, she worked in Evanston. So the whole idea of the town and gown, and sometimes the uniqueness of the town and gown to the surrounding counties and the politics as you go from state to state, shows an intensity that you have, and also an understanding of the haves and the have-nots. So the team that you have here, and we've worked together, we have worked in urban situations. We've worked Columbus together, we've worked Rochester together. I've worked in a few other places beyond that. So we get what it's like, and we know how to bring out the best in the public. So when you see all that information on the left-hand side, now I'm going to refer you to the right-hand side. Now on the right-hand side, there are key decisions the school board has to make. Now the thing that's important, a search firm, and sometimes the lead of the search firm, this is all about a relationship between us and you. You're in charge. But you have to also understand it's our job to explain to you the pros and cons of your decisions. And you make the final decision, but we're going to tell you if there's a red flag. You have a red flag in your calendar, I can tell you that right now. It's not going to work because it's too short for the time that you need to recruit the candidates. There'll be some decisions you'll need to make on how you want to handle the confidentiality. Some of this we can tell you the pros and cons, but this isn't the time for that. That's the type of thing, and when you get into the firm coming in and then talking about those details once you've hired somebody. You're talking about how you're going to do with your salary parameters. You're talking about community engagement. Now, let me tell you a little bit about what else is in here besides key decisions. I do have a sample calendar. This sample calendar is a draft, and in the end, it might change. In fact, I think I would even make a couple changes in this calendar even after I thought about it today. You see an example of the advertising outlets that you would normally use, but we're opening up and getting into some additional outlets. It just goes beyond the, you can get the National Association of the Black School Administrators, but you also want to get into the Latino organizations and see what's connected here in this immediate area. And we've seen more of a growth in trying to get into that advertising. The cost, or whether you go 30 days or 60 days, you're still going to be between $2,000 and $4,000. What you're going to do, you're a significant school system, you're going to be profiling and trying to do the similar things that your competitors are doing to go after candidates that are competing with you. You have a sample survey, and the survey is the type of thing that will get out into the community. And then I've added a couple things just today. We normally would give this to the board clerk, and this is organizing community activities when you do community engagement. Just an example, our community engagement process, we usually would come in the night before, interview all the board members. Then we would go two days full out, 8 in the morning till 10 at night. We would probably meet with over 30 groups. We would have open forums for staff, anybody internally, open forums for the public. We would probably, in a series of 30 meetings, probably meet 150, 200 people. But all of those meetings are controlled by the school board of saying, who do you want us to meet with? You're the experts. You tell us who you want us to meet with, and we'll meet any of those groups. And usually we can get a lot done. When you do this type of survey, and you get it on your website, and we could also do it in different languages, which we've had done in some other places, we've gone anywhere from 500 participants to 3,000. It all depends on how much you want to communicate. When you get done with all that, we're going to give a community engagement report, and the community engagement report is going to do a complete summary of everything we've heard. We asked 3 questions. What are the strengths of your school system? What are the challenges you're facing? What are the qualities and characteristics you'd like to see in your next superintendent? Same thing for each group. We take the information verbatim, we don't put our words in it, and we record it, and we give you a summary of it. Meanwhile, we have the quantitative survey, which does overlap. We'll provide all that, and once we have that, we'll do a draft profile of which you have to approve. That draft profile of what you're looking for will end up being how we're going to vet the candidates to see if they actually match. There's a lot of candidates that probably might be good superintendents, but they're not going to match a situation like this. The thing you have to understand, there's 18,000 school districts. Only 2% have more than 20,000. A superintendent in a system of 5,000 isn't going to understand the complexity here, even though that could be a superintendent of the year someplace else. So how we get into that vetting process and our superintendent experience, that's very important. The other thing that I think is important, and this is, and again, you have examples of what this looks like. It's going to be different on how this thing is all going to pan out here. Now, the question you're going to want to know, well, how's BWP doing in recruiting diverse candidates in systems that diversity is important, whether it's achievement gaps, whether it's sensitivity of how kids are learning, all the different things. Well, Columbus, Rochester, we have, my last 5 searches, 4 we have done African-American superintendents. You have a list now there of over 12 within the last 4 or 5 years. Now, I'll tell you what that means. In many cases, that doesn't mean that the pool has all African-American superintendents. It means the board have made choices that that candidate fit the profile and could be the face of the community. And sometimes that might not be in a community that necessarily has diversity. But when you are out there, people now look at us, particularly in the last 3 or 4 years, that we have been involved in some of these searches. So we know some people. Now, we don't have a stable at all, but we do seem to be getting a lot of good candidates that we're attracting. Sometimes they aren't just the superintendents. Sometimes if we go to Fairfax County, an area superintendent has 27,000 people reporting to that person's area. So a lot of your bigger systems, even the ones over 100,000, these are other people that have significant experience in quality places and also complexity that all of a sudden might be somebody the board might want to consider talking to. Now, here's the other thing that's very important. Our job is to take the applicants and vet them and make sure there's no surprises. You're counting on us to do that. I've never messed up. You know, I've done over 30 searches. You can call any school board chair or any place we've worked. We've been pretty good about vetting. The other thing is, you as a board, there's something that you can count on for us. When we get ready to give you a report, and we've been through the whole process, and we're going to present candidates, we will go over 100% of whoever applies. We will go individually through each candidate. We'll tell you why we didn't do 90%. Rochester, 2 months ago, a board member says, well, listen, this other person, I'd really like to know more about them. And we said, fine, we'll get you all the information. Let the board decide if they want to bring them in. That person had come in on the very last day of the process, and we hadn't had as much time to vet that person. They ended up choosing to interview that person. That person ended up being a finalist. Very good candidate. But that's where you need to know we're not going to not share everything with you. And we're open, because you're in control of that, to make any changes that you might want. The other thing we don't do, we don't rank order. If we give you 6 people that meet the profile, we're going to give them to you alphabetically. You're the ones who are going to have to decide that. Now, there's other options that you're going to have to consider. Just recently, we've just been on a run. The Day in the City seems to work well. It worked in Columbus, it worked in Rochester, it worked in Sumter. Some places will not have a day in the city, and they stay total confidentiality, which you can get the best pool. However, in Wisconsin, I'm under the impression that you have to put names out of your finalists. We have to say that up front. Now, here's something that could happen. Would that chill the pool? Maybe. But you're such a significant system for someone to want to be a superintendent here, even if they're in another system, it looks like it's a career type of move. So it isn't like they're going to necessarily be stepping down. So your reputation as a whole really works well for you. I'm just going to be honest with you. In Columbus, they were getting ready to take over the state. In Rochester, they were getting ready to talk about that. Both those systems have more diversity than your system, but the issues are still the same. In your system, I just see a lot of things working. I love your strategic plan. I really like the one on supporting innovation as one of your things. There's just a strength here and a solidness about the Midwest that you're going to attract a good pool of candidates. Now,
Mr.
our goal
Kastner?
isn't to see how many we can get. Our goal is to get good ones that are going to make your job hard.
Sorry, your time's up, so.
I'm
Want to
done.
close it up, or
I guess
a few
the
seconds?
only thing I would
Just-
tell you that one of our goals are, and I'm saying this because you're a new board. So we're in Sumter, South Carolina, and we have a divided board. Sumter board, the vote is unanimous. You want to try to go unanimous, because that's the sign that you have the total support. And that took a while to help them do that and let them be in control of it, and it took a little bit longer and a few extra meetings, but in the end, this lady that they've hired is just doing great. And our job is to kind of help you do that.
Great, thank you.
I'm done.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much.
Thank you. All right, so we have questions now. So Kate, do you want to get us started?
Yeah, sure. You actually tackled the first question in your kind of opening statement, but I guess I'd ask you to expand a little bit. I mean, you saw in our RFP, and certainly it sounds like you've listened to some of our meetings, the achievement gap that we are incredibly focused on closing is a #1 priority for us, and was one of the areas that I think we'd love to hear you talk a little bit more about in terms of your sourcing of candidates who have experience with anti-racist leadership, your kind of relationships in the states, really nationwide, with candidates of color, and how you kind of think through and that whole process. So
I was a director for the Urban Superintendent Association for many years when I was a superintendent. That whole group had a very diverse group of superintendents that we know. Paul McKendrick was on the urban superintendent group at Harvard University. The people there are preparing urban superintendents. Deb Hill, she was president of ASCD, or not ASCD, yes, ASCD, and again, she has more of a, I guess, a national, worldly connection all around, because that's when she had her role. She went to all these different countries. We really know the people, and the fact that many of the directors of BWP, and there's not directors but associates, there's over 50 of them in a lot of the states. They also have a lot of diversity and have been in some of the diverse systems. Percy Mack, superintendent in Dayton, he was superintendent in some areas in South Carolina. So we know these people, and we go to these conferences, we're part of these organizations. The Association for Great City Schools, I imagine you're a member of that, correct? Every system over 25,000, there's a lot of them. We also, in Richmond, Virginia, done the strategic plan and worked there for 4 years, and that's a pretty significant, a 90-90 system. So I would just tell you, we're out there, and particularly in the last few years, we've been out there even more, because when we go to national conferences and we have our booth there, we're running into a lot of the people. Now, what happens here, your timeline doesn't quite work as well, because the conference for AASA is in the end of February. You'll probably be done with everything there. So I would just say that our track record right now, if you look at, and you'll see it as over 13 superintendents in the last years, we've been, they just have been part of our pools. Now, again, I would say that we're pretty good as far as where we're at right now, and we have the evidence that shows that. Does that answer your question?
I think so. sure you'll
Great,
get
thank
more.
you. Is it a follow-up question to this?
Both process and
Okay, go ahead.
question. Um, So there were parts of the question as we have written here that I don't think that it got fully answered, and mostly because I think you've notified some parts of it.
Okay.
So I'm having a hard time even like scoring. So if
Okay.
you don't mind just staying like,
Literally reading it?
yeah, and I just
Yep.
confirmed to the teacher, like, I think we should just literally read it, just
Okay.
so people, so there's uniformity on interpretation.
All right, we can do
So,
that.
thank you.
So I'll read, it's racial equity strategies, that you are using an experience with anti-racist leadership experience, how you access this type of talent, and what the community and staff engagement process will look like. So I think I cut off the last community and staff engagement process.
Did I miss something?
I missed it, not you.
Well, was there
So-
something that I did not respond to that you're asking?
Community and staff engagement process.
Okay.
Is that what you were
Mhm.
missing, Ananda?
Sir,
Is that-
mostly, so the first part of the question was share your beliefs about equity more expensively. I think
Am I
that's,
reading the
About-
whole thing?
Okay, you're
I'm not
reading
in the
off
right
the
question.
evaluation
I'm
criteria?
reading the question,
oh, I'm sorry.
yeah.
Okay. Yes.
So just, okay, let's just pause here for a second. If you have a follow-up question, just write them down, and then at the end, we'll go ahead, or you can include it in your question that you were assigned on here. Okay? So, next, Nikki?
Yes, I have one on geography and one on special education. On geography, I know you've dealt with many cities. Have you dealt with areas the size and arena of Madison, Wisconsin? I know you said you've dealt with university towns before.
Me personally?
Like, yes, your firm, I should.
Well, firstly, of course. You look, when we did our proposal, a number of firms that were over 20,000. That in itself. Our experience, I worked in Prince George's County of 105,000. I worked in Frederick, Maryland, we're up to 45,000. Paul, again, larger systems, the same thing. So not only have we personally had work in larger systems, we also have done a lot of work. The job we did in Connecticut with 150,000 students capacity, Chesterfield 60,000. So the answer is yes.
And my other question is on funding employers' contracts, working with community groups, especially who have disabilities and knowledge and process of working with special education.
I don't think you cannot have a superintendent that has a track record that has the ability to work with all special needs kids. But I think right now it's
Okay.
even expanding in the sense that special needs has a whole new definition. You know, just like when we look at Columbine, those kids came from big houses. I mean, we've got mental problems, we've got a lot of things. So I think what you're finding in a lot of the professional developments occurring in school systems, that this whole area is further expanding. You're getting more staff into it. I might also say I have a different hat I wear. I am executive director and president of Cambridge Strategic Services, and I do strategic planning. When I work with the school system on strategic planning, all of these things about wellness come up for any school system. And so in doing that and working with this, it just gives me a greater sensitivity and appreciation of what's happening on the ground in other places.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki. Next is Chris.
So I have questions in 3 areas, and 2 of them you've already addressed pretty well, but I'll just put them out there in case you want to say
Please.
anything else. The first one is, how do you see your working relationship with the board?
You know, if you call a board president who we've worked with, you need to ask them. I think you'll find that we do have we have a respectful relationship and a trust. And I think that has to be earned. And a lot of that has to do, when you've been a superintendent and you work with boards the only way you can work well together is by having that trusting relationship. The other thing I think you'll find, when we get out in front of your community, when we're going to meet with your groups, what we're going to be telling them is this. You have a school board that is trusting us to come out here and hearing whatever you want to say and bringing it back to the public. So the transparency of the board in getting this outreach at a time when they're making their most important decision, they're doing it the right way. They aren't trying to do it just board down. They're trying to get inclusive as much as they can. Even if there's going to be diverse opinions, at least it has to all get on the table. See, this whole process, when you're getting into a search, is also a renewal for a school system. Even if a school system is doing pretty well, you're still going to have some energy that's going to occur as you kind of revisit a lot of things. If a school system's still reaching that next level, it also creates some of that energy.
Hey, Chris, can I ask a quick follow-up? And I think Sabian has one. Can you just say a little more about the actual team that will be working with us?
The what?
Can you say a little bit more about the actual team that will be working
Okay.
with us?
First,
I know, I mean.
while you
mentioned
have
Deb-
their bios and everything, Paul McKendrick, first off, we were Virginia superintendents together.
Yep.
And we did the searches in Columbus and Rochester together. Paul went to Tuscaloosa, has a Harvard education background, also worked in California, and just is a wonderful educator, and just worked very well with the community. Deb Hill, she is the managing director of BWP, and she's housed in Chicago, and there's a whole Midwestern market, and she knows all of these people, so she's
those are
going
the
to,
kind of three
and
people.
myself.
And you. So
Yeah.
those are kind of the three.
Paul and I on the ground, 100%, 24/7.
Okay.
Deb, we want her when it comes to the vetting and all of a sudden knowing the people to make sure we're not going to find any surprises with our candidate and try to work towards the pool.
Thank you.
So again, my second question, I felt like you addressed community engagement pretty well in your presentation, but I'll ask it just in case you want to say more about it, and that is how you'll do community engagement and when and how you will use the input. And maybe more details on when and how you'll specifically use the input we get from the community would be helpful.
When you see the report, you'll see there's certain things that are going to flush out when you look at what's most important issues you're dealing with in your school system. There won't probably be any surprises. But sometimes when we get into communication, we have places saying that our board is dysfunctional. That gets said. It's not necessarily going to get said here, but it could get said. But the fact is, then that talks about needing to maybe work together, because here's something I think you want to consider. The potential candidates are interviewing you too.
Mm-hmm.
And that they're trying to see, do I want to bring a family here? Do I want to work here? And there's times, and we've actually said this to a board, if you all don't get it together, we're not going to be able to get as strong a pool. Are you going to make a commitment? In some cases, if they do too much micromanaging, are you going to make a commitment that you need to look at that and maybe look at your protocols? Now, I'm being hypothetical here, but I'm saying a lot of things, the community engagement, the transparency of that, and the culture you're trying to do really sets the right tone for this whole process. And the fact that whatever group you want us to see, when we get in front of the group, they're going to feel they've had a voice. And in some cases, they might not have had this voice before. And the fact that it's going to get reported, and we're going to be making the highlights of what the main themes are, they're going to read that report and say, did that really get said? Did we get it? And then here's what happens. If it gets missed and they read the report, then they should be coming to the board meeting, or they should talk to a board member. They missed something that's important. So even though we're there for 3 days, you're still opening up this communication, which will tell them, you should still talk with the board members. They're the ones who are going to be making the decision. You should continue their relationships to give the input of what you're looking for in a superintendent.
And just a quick follow-up to that, do you ever encourage board members to participate in or attend those community forums, or?
Absolutely.
Okay, great.
We don't have any problem with that. And they do, particularly the forums. We've had a couple times where I don't think the staff is, if we're vetting, maybe you're doing with the administrative group or not, but I would never say no to anyone coming into a meeting. I mean, it is what it is.
And then my final
Oh,
question.
let me ask one.
Yeah.
It is important, you know, when we're taking notes down, we don't attribute it to any individual person. When we interview each of you, if we were doing that, we're not going to say, she said this, or he said this, or anything. We're anonymous on that to try to protect that.
And my final question is about failed searches, because we all know sometimes failed searches happen. Information about candidates can slip through the cracks, and or people just get into the room and.
Never had one.
You've never had a fail, or even BWP in general must have had. What we're wondering is, like, if we get our last two or three candidates in the room, and none of them is going to work out for us, what are the next steps? What
We're
do
gonna
you
start-
guys do?
Okay. We will start over at cost. Fee will not change. Again, we've never had it happen. And again, I hope it never will. And I think we've been fortunate to work with good systems where we're going to get a pool. And if a candidate leaves after the first year, we're going to do it over at cost. I've had that happen twice. One, a great superintendent's mother was dying of cancer, had to go back to California. We redid the search, and that person's been there for 7 years. Didn't charge. Next one, great superintendent, been there for 2 years, became the state superintendent in Virginia. Not a bad thing, but it wasn't because they weren't good candidates. I'll knock on wood. I mean, we have my track record's pretty good. And I can't think of Deb having any. In the history of BWP, it's possible, but I'm not aware of it.
I have a follow-up question, because I feel like I'm still not satisfied with the first question. I haven't heard the answer to the first question, so I'm going to try to make a connection with this. So some of the groups that we were going to ask for the community engagement process are groups that either serve predominantly families and youth of color. They will be either groups that either service providers or that they serve LGBTQ communities, or that they serve providers, or they are families with students with disabilities, and of course none of those things are mutually exclusive. What particular strategies have you applied in the past that have equipped you and your team, to understand the cultural nuances? So that's what when we're talking about, like, particular racial equity strategies. How have you heard those things? I'm also thinking about immigrant communities, immigrant youth. I'm thinking about English learners. So how have you you and your team have been able to bridge some of those cultural pieces and differences?
Frankly, that's the work of a superintendent. I mean, I have not been uncomfortable with any groups that we've worked with, because we work with people. And we don't just, we work with diversity. I mean, that's just part of the role of an active superintendent being out in their community. And we've been good superintendents that I think if you had talked, I think it's a good question, and it's got to be done right for Madison or any place we work. So I think the value of that, we have credibility when we're there. We sometimes, particularly in Rochester, we had a group, and it was a very, very activist group that their whole theme was institutional racism. Well, we had to work with that, and we had to figure out how to bring that out. And I remember the person who maybe didn't start out so friendly when we started the meeting. He says, "You listen." And that's, we're not there to preach, we're there to listen. And I think you start work, you understand by listening to people, not by telling them certain things. And I think those skill sets, when you are involved in some of these searches, if anything, they even get better honed. I'm better at that now than I might have been as a superintendent. Because you aren't doing it by position. See, if you're a superintendent, then all of a sudden you got this title. You come in as an outsider, you have no title at all. Your title has to be with how you are going to project the empathy, or at least the way that understands that you can get people to be comfortable talking with you.
Okay.
I hope that is a little better answer.
Sure. Yes, thank you. So I'm next. And then do you want to do a time check? How much more time we have?
We have like 10 minutes.
Okay. So we have 10 minutes and you have 3 questions.
You wait until your time because you're next. Okay, go ahead.
So my question is around, I think you started out the interview with talking about our timeline, our proposed timelines. How do you plan to push back when we make decisions, when we feel differently than you and your team, and giving us some feedback? What is the connection? Okay, sorry, there's multiple questions in here, and
Well, let's talk about pushback.
yeah,
There's no pushback because you make the final decision.
okay,
But if this is the most important thing you do as a board, you want to take advantage of our expertise. And if we tell you this is the way to get the best possible pool for you to make choices, because you need to open it up beyond 30 days, you need to go out and consider 45 or 60 days, then we're only saying that because you're trying to help you get the best candidate. See? But if you have a timeline that's absolute and being dictated to you, then we'll figure out a way to shorten it up. And we've done that. But in the ideal way, we can tell you what the best window might be. But in the end, whoever you end up hiring, once they tell you, or we tell you what we think the pluses and minuses, it's your call. And we'll make it work.
thank you. So the second part of the question you spoke pretty lengthy about, but I wanted to make sure that you have anything else to add. So what was your connection, was you or your team connection to the pool of candidates, and particularly candidates like from diverse backgrounds, both racially, ethnically, sex, gender, IEPs, free reduced lunch, district sizes and demographics, so kind of that sort of question around the pool of candidates that have this diverse background. How does the recruitment works in community engagement that sets you apart from other firms? And and then the last part of the question is what's the tools that you assess the candidates, and tools or strategies or questionnaires or profiles?
Well, I think our recent track record, we don't compete against another firm one way or the other, but I would say that just most recently, the team you have here has been successful in similar systems. And we actually have, in working with a lot of candidates, we do Zoom interviews. We don't bring anybody to the board. We haven't at least personally seen them on Zoom, or sometimes we'll bring them in if they're regionally close and do the interview that way.
Okay.
The other thing is probably just as important. It's the people that we know who know them, who they don't necessarily know they know them. And when you're getting down into that, you're going to figure out just who really is good. We've actually, have you ever heard the name Louis Farabee? He was superintendent in Indianapolis. We didn't even know who he was. And he ended up being one of our candidates, and we kept hearing great things, and turned out he didn't get the job that he was trying to apply, and now he's superintendent in Washington, D.C. So we, as you, working with some of these pools, we're hearing more and more names out there. And so I would have to say right now, a lot of this is fresh for us. Not that I can say there's someone right here that I know. See, we have 5 big school systems in Wisconsin, right? So you don't know who's out there. You might have some talented people here. I don't know who they are. And here's one thing I need to tell you. It's very hard for us to vet an internal candidate because of confidentiality initially. So sometimes we're going to have to rely on the board to help us out more there.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next, Ollie.
How will your firm take an intersectional approach to inclusion that ensures candidates are members of diverse groups? What language will you use? So I feel that you've spoken to that part extensively. What language will you use to ensure members of the LGBTQ community are encouraged to apply? How will you represent the district's ability to support leaders with disabilities, LGBTQ leadership, and the leadership of people of color?
Well, first, as you know, everything's neutral as far as who our applicants are. And a lot of it is if people have an interest in the pool and they want to be an applicant, it has to do with their interest and also how good they are professionally. See, the bottom line is how good is their work. And they're good at the work, all that other stuff then just kind of steps away. We certainly have seen candidates that are not as traditional as candidates we've seen in the past. In some cases, we didn't even know that when they applied, because there's just a certain protection there, and it more has to do with the work.
Yeah, so specifically, how will you represent our ability as a board to support diverse candidates? So how would you speak to the board's ability to support a superintendent who is disabled, a superintendent who's a person of color, a superintendent who's LGBTQ, very specifically to language? So I noticed this very consistently from all of the firms, that he or she was used really frequently, which can alienate folks who don't identify with the gender binary. So are you prepared to do things that you haven't done before, or use language you've never used before?
I would have to say, if we need to be, if we have to up our game in any of our public language, then help us out on some of that. Things have changed. I have seen this come up. It has come up in some of our meetings. The last thing, and we'd like to have everything to go through your public relations office. We'd like that type of help as far as translating any of that. So we have to meet your standard. You don't have to meet we have to meet yours. So we're going to have to work with staff to make sure we get that thing right. Now, but I come back to the most important thing that you have that interest in. Whoever it is, are they significantly creating that track record of success that they're going to cause you to think that they're going to make the difference in your system? So it's all about the effectiveness of the work, and that's where it stops. And to make it, that's just the way it works out. Now, why did these boards didn't hire African American superintendents because they were African American. They hired them because they were darn good in what they were doing, and they also were showing, in some cases, the whole issue of turnaround is a whole concept. They've shown success in things like that. They separated themselves.
Thank you. Xavier?
Yeah, and you've spoken to this a little bit, but we have a community in Madison that wants to see the district fully commit itself to, anti-racist leadership and practices and principles. Can you, share, and I think the community wants to have a hands-on experience and wants to be as involved as possible. Can you just share insights in how your public engagement meetings are conducted and what works, what hasn't worked over the past, or you know, what you have found works really well and getting the best out of people in terms of how they really feel and really organizing their thoughts.
Again, I welcome you to call other school board people that have seen our work. We do a good job in communication. We present ourselves well and show respect to whoever the groups are. We're counting on you to make sure who the groups are. Now, there's one thing that you probably will be able to take advantage of that really is a very positive community engagement piece, and that's if you do a day in the city. If you do a day in the city and you have a candidate that's going to be out in front of some of the groups and people can come see that person and see them answer questions, you are going to show a transparency where there are going to be a lot of people involved. And in doing that, that's usually a positive thing. The downside is there's two great candidates and you've got a divided community on something like that, it doesn't always come out clean. And the other thing you have to consider, the board's going to know more than anybody's going to know during an hour meeting, because they're going to know all of the deep references and they're going to know all the other details about these candidates that they can't possibly get, that you're going to get when you go through your rounds of interviews. But I have seen that on communities that really say they want to be engaged in everything, that practice in itself has gone very well. Now, some of these people want more. They would like to hire the superintendent. That's not their job. That's your job. But there are some people, and we're talking about activists that, you know, want that other involvement, and that's a balancing act that you have. And it's not unusual, and probably in university towns, you probably see a little bit more of this than other places.
Great, thank you. So I just have one last question. Is we are in a place where we can be innovative, right, and creative in selecting a new superintendent. Right? We are in a place of wanting more, and really that selection of a diverse pool. And so we have, I know throughout the district and the city and the county have really expanded and really changed the systemic way of hiring processes, right? We have racial equity lens. And I want to know if you have looked at your own process through that lens to ensure that we are not eliminating candidates who we typically would not see in a superintendent role. So I'm just curious about that. I mean, I know we've touched on that a little bit throughout, but I think answering that question for me, I think will be really important, because we can't continue to do searches the way we have historically done searches, because there's a systemic issue in bringing candidates of diverse backgrounds. So I'm just wondering what you have done within your own company and to be creative and innovative around that.
Our track record is excellent. We're getting diverse pools, and they're staying. And the thing is, I just to be frank with you, you are a larger school system. You're an urban type system. There are a lot of people that, even if they have all this different diversity, do they have the experience of being able to do the job? And so the question is, we're looking for the quality of the candidate that can provide the leadership for the system. Now, in all of the other urban systems, we're talking about the 180 systems of bigger, they're great candidates in that. And we are attracting them. And again, look at the record that we've had. I couldn't say we were as good at this 5 years ago, but recently we were fortunate to get the job in some of these other places. And if you would call those if you would call a board president or any of our references, which I think should speak more than me, how did they feel about the diversity of their pool? and they had the same goal that you had. Now, if you're talking about now, do we want to find a process that goes out of the box? I don't have that experience because I haven't had the necessity of doing that, because what we've had has been working.
Okay.
Oh, we have had we had a great candidate who was from the Pentagon. He was in the War College. Alternative candidate, had a lot going for him. He interviewed. The board found someone else that was a little stronger instruction-wise. So we were getting those type of candidates. So I don't know if I've answered your question,
Yeah, I mean, I
other than
think-
I have confidence
So, yeah.
with what we have been able to deliver, that has been a diverse pool.
So
Now,
I-
when
I
we
s-
get a pool, we'll show you
Yeah.
all of that.
And I see you have a diverse staff.
Well, yes.
Right, and I'm just wondering if that is one of the areas that you touch on, or that you look to, right, to advance your equity. If that is a strategy,
Well,
right?
of course, we have to, if everybody looked like me in a system like this, that's not going to reflect well. You have to have the diversity. I mean, and people that have been successful in these places.
Great, thank you. Anything else from board members? Any questions, Nikki?
I had one, but then it was answered partway through.
Okay. Mrs. Savian?
You've touched on Rochester in the application. You talked about Columbus, Ohio. Are there any other school districts that you think have, when at the point of you working with them, have underwent similar changes that Madison has? So, you know, we're now a district that's majority students of color, but that's relatively new. You know, we have some interesting population projections over the next 20 years. Just 2 years ago, we, you know, finally established an institutional language around systemic racism. And any other school districts that you've worked with have that at that moment in time were undergoing those changes?
Well, I spent 4 years working in Richmond, which is a 90-90 system, with their strategic plan. I was very proud of Richmond. I really liked the work. You walk into schools, I didn't see graffiti, I didn't see kids out in the halls. I saw a good culture and I saw some work happening. I learned a lot from that. Madison is doable. Some of these, in Rochester and in some of these other systems, the poverty is so overwhelming, and the complexity of all the needs that they have. You're in a place right here where you are not at the extreme end, and all of a sudden, I think you're going to see, if you have the right type of leadership, you're going to be exceptionally strong. And so I don't see, you're not, some of those places, and I base this on the fact that they were considering takeovers, are more from a deficit. You're in an additive situation. And therefore, I think with good leadership of the board and keeping in front of this and continuing finding the high-quality programs that you have to have and attracting and keeping good staff, you're in a good position. You as a board are poised, many of you still being new now, of owning a new superintendent and really taking off. That's my opinion. And I think you have a great chance for that.
Great, thank you. Do you have any questions for us?
I guess the timeline that you have, you're going to have to work out. I would have to say that if we were to come back and we got the job, we would probably be going through some of this by going through those key decisions. And the other thing is, this thing is like peeling off layers of an onion. You're learning a lot of this stuff. Tonight, you're seeing one person, you're going to think about it, and you're going to have some additional questions later. So a lot of this, if you keep doing due diligence, and you end up getting the process and the trust that we can work back and forth, you don't necessarily have final product right away. So it's kind of working as a team. you're going to see that one slide that I showed on the left-hand side that talks about that whole issue of all the gears coming in together. This is that perfect opportunity. This is that perfect opportunity as a lot of these things are going to happen. And I've just been very fortunate that I've seen it as a positive experience. I have not, and again, I hope this is going to always be, I can say this, I've not had a search that a board hasn't worked well together because of the importance of what you have to do. And it all comes back to the kids. I mean, there's nothing more moral for a ground of what you have to do. And I know you all have a great diverse background among yourselves. Congratulations on your recent appointment. I guess we left out one thing. One of the things that we definitely are going to do if we get into community engagement, we'd like to get into the schools. We would like to be able to hear from the kids. And even when we disaggregate the survey, sometimes get it and disaggregate it from what the students say. So there's a lot of options that we can have, and their voices sometimes are very interesting. Again, I want to thank you for the opportunity. I hope I've been able to answer your questions, and again, I feel more comfortable you asking other people that we've worked for if everything I've said is what we do, and I think we do. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, 2 minutes.
Thank you so much. Nice meeting you.
Nice meeting you. Thank you so much.
that Kate, yep, Kate, tomorrow.
We have it on the calendar for Monday.
Oh, for Monday, I'm sorry, for Monday, yeah.
We are
Um,
not meeting tomorrow?
Yeah, we are meeting tomorrow. We have 2 interviews tomorrow,
Yeah.
okay? So we will be, on Monday, then we'll vote. We'll have a discussion, we'll vote, and then we will, talk about, references, that Kate and I have been doing.
Well, is there any chance you guys could send like a summary of the reference checks before Monday?
Can you do that? Okay,
That'd be fantastic.
Yeah, we can figure out what we want to,
yeah.
yep, absolutely.
Any other questions?
Yep.
So 2 interviews tomorrow. Monday we'll have the discussion and vote and talk about reference checks. Anything else? How do you guys feel that went today? I know,
I was confused
Okay.
of which questions we're supposed
Yeah.
to be asking.
Oh, gotcha,
and
yeah.
it's specifically because my session, it was like, just
a
It
lot.
was a lot.
a lot of stuff. I was like, I did not know that was like, and some of it did not make sense very well. So anyway, so I apologize for.
Yeah.
So it's like, how am I scoring this?
Yeah.
If the questions are different
Yeah.
than what we are, and then like, yeah, it makes sense. So I
Yeah.
apologize for like. kinda
Yeah,
getting
we
thrown in the
we
beginning.
really we just took pockets of information that we talked about last time. We
Yeah.
didn't want to like tweak it or anything. It was like, just, you can
Yeah.
ask it however you want.
Yeah.
But we just kind of put it all in one topic area.
No, it made sense that then there were because we were following like different questions that I was like not set up.
Yes.
That question that I wanted to,
Right,
it surfaced at
Yeah.
Other places.
gotcha. Ali?
I think efficiency is really important, particularly tomorrow if we're gonna have 2 interviews back to back. And so one thing I'd like to suggest is that follow-up questions be saved until the end.
Yeah.
Unless it's the question that you're asking and you wanna provide clarification on getting that answer. If it's somebody else's question and you have follow-up, I think it makes sense to wait to the end. The other thing I think is it would have been beneficial to a certain extent to time the answer. And I don't want to be inconsistent with the other people, but I think having enough time at the end for the person to ask us questions and for us to ask follow-up questions is relevant to this process. So I think
Ali, please, you gotta turn on your mic. It's behind your thing.
I think that there is some tension around asking somebody, do you have any questions 5 minutes after their interview was supposed to end, especially if somebody else is waiting to come in or they think
Yeah.
somebody else is waiting to come in. And so I don't want to stifle anybody's ability to ask us questions or to get to the end of the interview because the questions we have are taking so long. So
Yeah. Thank you for that.
even just telling folks to answer within,
Yeah.
2 to 3 minutes,
Yeah.
I feel like could enhance.
So
Kind of
we're
concise
all good
answers.
for tomorrow, holding off our follow-up questions until the end, unless, like what Ali suggested, it pertains to your own question. And then I think we should be more efficient tomorrow. I think we have to balance it, right? Because I really want the free-flowing of conversation that sort of happened here today, right? So we're trying to balance it. But I think what will help is if we leave the follow-up questions to the end. That'll give us an opportunity to give some more time to the firm to ask us questions.
You need this back?
No, you can take those.
One thing that I added on to Chris's question today, but just from doing the reference checks, I think for us to add in tomorrow, and we asked it today, so it'll be okay, what's the specific team and making sure we have a really clear understanding of the exact individuals who will be here on the ground, supporting farther away, whatever the dynamics are, but just really getting clear on the exact individuals.
I appreciate that you asked that, because
Yeah.
they're not actually these people they're listening to.
Right.
Just making sure that we have a grasp on that.
Who was asking around transparency?
Stop saving me.
I think Savion.
Oh, that was your question.
All right. Well then, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. We are adjourned. Thank you all.